The Beaumont Confectionery Works rose out of the river fog like a caramel-coloured cathedral. Its brick chimney, retired decades ago, still bore the copper letters BEAUMONT, and tourists swore they could smell phantom cocoa every time the wind scraped over the old flues. From Tuesday through Saturday, I guided those tourists, 30 at a time, along the tiled corridors, past vintage enamel advertising signs, and finally into the tasting room, where melted dribbles of 72% Ecuadorian dark stilled even the noisiest school group. Being a tour guide in a landmark whose walls are saturated with sugar was never dull, but nothing compared to the morning the Beaumont family descended to fight over an empire that was, by rights, never supposed to need defending. Tamara Beaumont, the factory's last direct descendant, had died 2 weeks earlier. 87 years old, stubborn as a praline shell, she had left everyone certain she'd arranged her affairs with the same precision she applied to tempering chocolate. Yet the will read at the courthouse listed only vague charitable bequests, and to everyone's shock named no primary heir. Beaumont stock immediately wobbled, employees panicked about their pensions, and rival confectioners licked their lips. The family insisted a later document must exist. If it did, it would likely be hidden somewhere on the premises. Tamara trusted bricks and bolts more than bank vaults. So on a blustery Thursday, the claimants converged. Jonas Locke, her slick nephew, Claire Huxley, her quiet step-granddaughter, and Gerald Finch, her in-house counsel who now represented himself, sniffing a contingency fee the size of a warehouse. Management closed the factory to public tours, but Tamara's handwritten directives required that the visitor experience never cease, even during transitions. That meant me. The family would investigate room after room behind a velvet rope while I narrated the facility's history for a single reporter from the Riverbury Gazette, who served as our pocket-size public witness. The notion was pure Tamara, transparency sugared with nostalgia. We began in the rotunda under the mural where St. Christopher passed cocoa beans to a band of Victorian angels. Jonas smiled for the journalist's camera, all bright teeth and cufflinks, yet he kept scanning each display cabinet the way a magpie studies shiny objects. Claire drifted behind, notebook in hand, every few minutes brushing her auburn bangs out of her eyes to scribble something. Gerald Finch huffed, wheezing from the fine-spun dust of cacao nibs embedded in the old terrazzo floor. I recited dates, 1879, factory founded, 1913, first South American trade contracts, 1946, the hazelnut expansion. But my gaze kept snagging on Jonas's linen blazer. His elbows were peppered with faint brown specks, not the flecks of old factory rust, but fresher, duller, like untempered chocolate that has bloomed grey. Where had he leaned? We reached the heart of the building, the Heritage Gallery, with its glass-fronted vault of antique machinery, each piece lovingly decommissioned, polished, and positioned on walnut plinths. The star was the 1880 Hagenmeyer cocoa grinder, twin granite wheels within an iron cradle, encased under a bell jar of leaded glass. Visitors always cooed over the hand-cast brass plaque, Beaumont No. 1, and the crank handle polished smooth by a century of shoulders. When schoolchildren asked whether it still worked, I'd tap the sealed acrylic seam inside the glass and say, "Not unless the past breaks loose." Jonas pressed against the barrier rope, eyes glinting. "When was the last time anyone opened that display?" he asked me. "About 15 years ago," I said. Mrs. Beaumont supervised the dusting personally, then ordered it locked. "Why?" "Curiosity," he said. But his gaze lingered on the glass rim as if measuring it for removal. Claire, meanwhile, darted to the side pedestal where a silver sugar thermometer stood like a jeweller's wand. She jotted something, cheeks flushed. Finch coughed. "We're here for paperwork, not a museum crawl." "Actually," I replied, "Tamara directed that the will's successor be whomever can unriddle the Beaumontry of heart and hand. She never told us what that meant. Maybe the answer is in here." I spread my arms to indicate the whole gallery. It was a gambit. I'd overheard the executor mention the cryptic line, and I suspected Tamara must have hidden a physical clue. But I also wanted to keep the visitors where I could watch them, and nothing glued people in place like a fresh puzzle. We moved on to the Copper Kettle Hall, but my thoughts stuck to the grinder. I had dusted the bell jar only yesterday, and I would swear its plexiglass seal had been intact. Yet today a crescent-shaped smudge tarnished the surface near the hinge. Something or someone had lifted that cover recently. After the official tour concluded and the Gazette reporter left for her deadline, the family and their lawyer requested private workspace in Tamara's old office. I escorted them upstairs, unlocked the carved door, and gave them privacy. Then I doubled back to the Heritage Gallery. No cameras were installed there. Tamara worried electronics would ruin the romance. But the factory kept emergency fingerprint powder and lifting tape in the safety cabinet for the occasional school prank gone wrong. I fetched them, feeling foolish in my tour guide blazer, until I tugged a lab coat over it. I'd learned basic lifting technique from the factory's security orientation. We dealt with missing truffles more often than you'd think. The bell jar indeed bore a partial greasy print overlaying my own cleaning streak. I puffed cocoa brown powder across the area, as gentle as dusting a truffle with Dutch process. A ridge pattern blossomed, a full index finger. It was fresh, too crisp to be Tamara's from 15 years ago. I pressed clear tape over it and sealed the lift inside a tasting room sample bag. Why would anyone open the grinder? Unless... The idea arrived fully tempered. Tamara's final amendment, her real will, could be hidden inside the iron cradle. She once claimed that inheritance ought to be earned by turning a handle or two. Jonas might have opened the display already, but failed to figure out the mechanism, then resealed it poorly. If I got there first, I might save the factory from his grin. I scanned the plinth. Tamara had been clever. Bolts on the bell jar's base looked antique, but were actually modern torque screws requiring a rare bit. Fortunately, the maintenance workshop engraved every screwdriver head with a code, and I had memorized them to amuse schoolkids. I fetched the right tool, trying not to imagine security dragging me off for vandalism. The bell jar lifted with a breath-stopping pop, exhaling decades of trapped cocoa scent, rich as a holiday night. I stroked the iron yoke. Nothing obvious. Then I saw 3 shallow scratches near the crank's hinge. New. Someone else had tried prying. I rotated the handle. Metal groaned, then clicked. The left granite wheel loosened, revealing a cylindrical hollow inside the axle, capped with a brass disc etched with Tamara's loopy B. My pulse pounded like a conche. Before I could pry the disc, footsteps scuffed behind me. I replaced the bell jar, crooked, but it would have to do, and turned. Claire Huxley stood in the archway clutching her notebook against her chest. "I hoped it was you," she said in a half-whisper, eyes shining. "Your tours are the only honest thing in this circus." "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to stall while aligning the bell jar more neatly. She stepped closer. "I think Aunt Tamara hid something inside that machine. I saw Jonas in here last night." "Last night?" "He bribed the night guard. I couldn't stop him." So the smudge wasn't from this morning. Jonas already had a head start. Yet the contents remained, or he'd have walked out with them. Perhaps he didn't realize the axle was hollow. I told Claire what I'd found, fingerprints and all. Her face brightened like sugar hitting the heat. "We need proof," she said. "Jonas will swear the grinder hasn't been touched." I showed her the taped lift. "We've got it." Voices echoed from the stairwell, Jonas's melodic baritone and Finch's blunt growl. Claire ducked behind a display of nougat cutters, while I resettled the bell jar as straight as possible and wiped stray powder with my sleeve. Jonas breezed in. "There you are, Iris. Finch and I require your help. Tamara's safe deposit inventory refers to a heritage packet stored on site. We think it relates to this gallery." I feigned puzzlement. "I can show you the catalogue ledger." "Excellent," Finch said, sweat stippling his forehead. As I led them to the archive desk, I glimpsed Jonas's sleeve again, speckles of bloom, and now that I focused, faint rust at his collar, granite dust. My confidence grew. But we needed believers. Security Chief Darnell Jung never trusted Jonas, and he respected chain of custody. Claire and I slipped him the fingerprint lift during a faux coffee break. Darnell raised an eyebrow. "You messin' with evidence, Iris?" "Saving it," I said. "I think Tamara's real will is in the grinder. Jonas already broke in, and those ridges aren't mine." Darnell examined the print through a loop, then scanned our employee files for Jonas's biometric card scan, an identical whorl on his right index. He grunted approval. We still lacked the document itself. At closing time, Darnell locked the Heritage Gallery, pocketed the key, and requested the Beaumonts gather in the tasting hall for an update. Under the copper pendant lamps, we waited while Claire and I buttered sample shortbread to kill anxiety. Jonas strode in, blazer immaculate, though I noticed he'd swapped it for one free of speckles. Finch followed, muttering. "Where's the update?" Jonas asked. Darnell took center stage. "We discovered unauthorized access to a display case. We will open it together, in front of witnesses, to see what's missing." He signaled 2 staffers, and we processed down the corridor in tense silence until we reached the gallery. I unlocked the jar. Jonas's smile tightened. Perhaps he feared we'd find nothing and accuse him of theft, or worse for him, find something that incriminated him. I twisted the crank. With the audience watching, the granite wheel swung aside. Gasps fluttered. I lifted the brass disc and extracted a scroll of parchment, sealed with brown wax bearing Beaumont's B. Finch lunged. Darnell cleared his throat, and Finch froze. "Chain of custody," the chief said, gloved hands accepting the parchment. He passed it to the courthouse registrar, summoned in advance. The registrar cracked the seal, unrolled the document on a velvet tray, and read aloud, "I, Tamara Elise Beaumont, being of sound mind and restless spirit, declare this my final codicil. The stewardship of Beaumont Confectionery shall pass to the individual whose hands have learned its rhythm, who has guided its stories, and whose fingerprints shall prove earnest curiosity unmarred by greed. To wit, the guide, specifically Ms. Iris Delgado, shall inherit controlling interest of 51%, to hold in trust for all factory employees. The remaining shares shall be divided equally between my step-granddaughter Claire Huxley and the Beaumont Foundation. Should this document be contested by one whose fingerprints breach the sanctity of the cocoa grinder prior to public reading, let that act stand as evidence of disqualifying avarice." Silence broke like brittle caramel. Jonas's face drained. "This is absurd," he sputtered. She'd never give her company to a tour guide. Finch stepped back, already recalculating his retainer. Claire's gaze met mine, equal parts joy and relief. Aunt Tamara always said the factory belongs to the people who love it. Darnell cleared his throat again, the comic timing of a maitre d'. We have fingerprint evidence of unauthorized case tampering belonging to Mr. Jonas Locke. The codicil calls that disqualifying. Jonas pivoted toward me, anger ripening. You set me up. I cleaned glass, I said quietly. You left prints. He spun to Claire. You'll let strangers take the family legacy? Claire folded her arms. I'll honor the codicil. Iris isn't a stranger. She taught me how to temper chocolate when I was 9. The registrar announced that witness signatures were sufficient for provisional execution. The codicil would proceed to probate without Jonas's consent. Finch, eyeballing a barrelful of billable hours, advised his client to step carefully. Jonas's jaw worked like taffy. Then he stormed out. In the days that followed, my life fractured like over-crystallized fudge and reformed into something shinier. Lawyers swarmed. Reporters trailed me through streets smelling of rain and cocoa. Headlines dubbed me the chocolate heretic and Wonka-style heiress. But inside the factory, work steadied. Employees who'd feared layoffs cheered the trust arrangement. I traded my tour blazer for office denim, yet insisted on leading 1 tour a week. Tamara's voice echoed in my ears. Never forget the sound of children tasting history. Claire became Chief Creative Officer, sketching new bar designs that paired ghost pepper with passion fruit. The factory's boardroom smelled like chili for a month, but we survived. Jonas contested the codicil, of course, claiming coercion and forgery. His argument melted under cross-examination. The fingerprint match, time-stamped security logs, and his own bribe of the night guard, who flipped for immunity, sealed it. The probate judge noted Tamara's delightful foresight. She'd predicted greed would leave physical evidence, just like cocoa dust on careless hands. One April afternoon, as sun-striped caramel streaks across the Heritage Gallery floor, Claire and I lifted the bell jar for the last time that season. We installed a new glass sign beside the grinder. In this machine, history turned and the future clicked into place. Beneath the words, housed in a shadow box, lay the fingerprint lift, brown powder ridges stark against clear tape, labelled Exhibit A, Jonas Locke v. Estate of Tamara Beaumont, 2023. Schoolkids would ask what it meant. I was ready with the short version. Chocolate remembers who touches it. But when grown-ups lingered after tours, curious about the gossip they'd half heard on the news, I offered the longer tale. How a woman who loved stories more than sugar hid her final message in an axle. How fingerprints, the oldest language on earth, spelled out motive and mistake. And how inheritance, like chocolate, is at its best when shared. Sometimes I described the exact moment the crank handle clicked and the granite wheel eased aside, releasing decades of fragrant dust. Tourists inhaled, imagining the scent. Children widened their eyes. And always, always I ended with the sentence Tamara wrote in looping sepia ink, the line that had changed everything. Stewardship belongs to the one who guides the story. Then I guided them down the corridor, past a window where real grinders rumbled, granite jaws churning fresh nibs into silk. The air trembled with the promise of something sweet earned the honest way. With patience, with curiosity, and inevitably with hands clean enough to show the world.